Hey everyone, it's Carissa Wiley at sprinkledwithglitter.com. Thanks for joining me today. Today I am sharing an easy card that would be perfect for creating multiples of, and it features some products from Waffle Flower Crafts and also a free gift that's available from scrapbook.com. And stick around, I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. But Waffle Flower was so generous to send me a few of their holiday products. I am in love with their holiday line this year, and there is still more on my wish list. But here's a few of the things that they sent me here. I'm going to be focusing in on this Holly Jolly background die along with the coordinating stencil set, which you can see here on the background. I'm also going to be using these family Christmas sentiments and coordinating dies. I love sentiments like this with the coordinating dies that are shaped. Now, in addition to that, they have sent me a few other supplies that I haven't had a chance to play with yet, but you'll see those here. There are some sentiment banner dies. There are some layering sentiment stencils along with the coordinating dies and the little overlay stamp set. And finally, a poinsettia that includes a stencil set and coordinating die as well. But I want to talk to you about this mini postage poinsettia set. This mini postage die and stencil set is available for a limited time over at scrapbook.com as a free gift with purchase, and I will link to the details of that below. But you're going to get both the little die and the mini stencil set, and it creates the most beautiful pattern. So I'm going to be featuring that in the center of my card. I did want to mention that this free promo starts today over at scrapbook.com and will go through July 31st or while supplies last. So I have my rose quartz scout machine here, which is a scrapbook.com exclusive, and my mini postage die, and I'm just running that through the die cut machine with some white cardstock to die cut this adorable little stamp. Now, the thing I love about this die is that you can use it throughout the year if you just use the die alone. You don't have to use it with the stencil set, but isn't that the most adorable shape you've ever seen? And it's perfectly sized for a card. Now I'm bringing in my rose quartz Misty stamping tool. I have a waffle flower grip mat in there, and I am going to press this die cut into the center of that grip mat, and this grip mat is going to hold my paper and my dies in place while I do my stenciling. Now on these mini stencils, there is a registration line that you will line up with the center part of the stamp, and they are marked and they say like poinsettia light color, poinsettia medium color. So it's very helpful to find those little etching guides on this mini die set. They didn't cut any corners on this, even though it's a freebie. So I've laid down the first stencil. You can see my grip mat in my Misty stamping tool is holding the stencil in place as I add my Ballet slipper ink. Now I am moving on to stencil number 2. I'm just lining up that registration mark with the inside square or rectangle of the postage, and that's helping me get everything aligned. And this one is marked with a medium color. So I am moving on to Concord and Ninth's watermelon ink and inking that over the top. And keep in mind that these colors will absorb into the paper and dry back just slightly. Now, this is quick stenciling, which is why I think it would be really great for mass producing. And I will be doing some stenciling on my background as well, which is another reason that I think that this is a great idea for a mass producing card, because you can just use white cardstock and your inks to add color to all of these different elements that we're creating today. Now for the leaves, I am actually going to do a two-tone leaf color. I'm starting out with Concord and Ninth's Juniper ink, and I'm using a smaller blending brush because this is a smaller area, and you're going to see why that's important here in just a moment. So I'm going to go over the entire leaf area with this Juniper ink, and then I'm going to take my microfiber cloth and I'm going to wipe down the stencil, and then I will bring in Concord and Ninth's Rainforest ink, which is a really deep, beautiful, rich green color. I actually call it like a chameleon color because it can lean a little towards the blue side or a little towards the green side, and it can also make a great substitute for black as well. So now that I have my Rainforest ink, I'm going in just on the tips of these leaves and adding a little bit of that darker color towards the base. And that's why a mini blending brush is really important for this portion if you're wanting to do a two-tone inking on such a small image. Now, on a larger image, you may be able to get away with a larger blending brush, but because these images are so small, I thought the mini ink blending brush would be a better idea. Now I'm moving on to stencil number 4, and for this includes the centers of the flowers as well as a few other little mini dots that are kind of scattered around. And I wanted the center of these florals to be Stardust colored, so I'm taking my mini blending brush and just blending over those areas. And once I have the floral centers done, I'm going to go ahead, wipe off my stencil, and bring in the Concord and Ninth Sea Glass color. And if you recognize this color palette, yes, this is my 2024 Christmas color palette that I'm going to be using over and over again. You can see how using these colors in different concentrations will change the feel of a card. And I think today's card is a great example of that. If you've missed some of my previous Christmas in July videos from this year, you can go back and check those out, and I will put a link to that playlist here. Now, once I've inked over all those other areas with my mini blending brush and my sea glass ink, I'm going to wipe down my stencil and then remove it. And you can see I have this adorable poinsettia image. I wish I had some of the postage stamps from Waffle Flower where you can stamp like the little 5-cent mark in the corner. I think that would be an adorable addition to this. But for now, I'm just going to have to wait until all of that comes back into stock so I can order it. Now I'm using the Holly Jolly background cover die from Waffle Flower Crafts, and I'm going to die cut it from a panel of white cardstock that measures 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. I've run that through my die cut machine, and you're going to notice that all of these images actually stay attached inside of this background, and it's so cool because it cuts around like most of the image, but not the complete image, so that you can pop these up and create some dimension in this die cut background. The lines on the outside of the die cuts will also help you line up your stencil. Now, my daughter, who kind of helps me in my craft room every now and then, asks me, why didn't you do the stenciling first and then do the die cutting? And I thought that was a really good question that I should answer here. So because that large cover die has a solid backer to it, you wouldn't be able to line up the die cutting with the stenciling if you were to do the stenciling first. So you're going to want to die cut your panel of cardstock first, and then you will have all the lines that you need to line up your stencil properly and do your inking. You can see I'm using some of the same colors that I used in our mini postage poinsettia image earlier. I am using Juniper over the entire leaf area, and then I'm coming in with a smaller ink blending brush and the Concord and Ninth Rainforest ink and adding a little bit of depth to the base of these leaves. Now, if you were mass producing this card, you could, instead of using multiple colors on the stenciling, just do one color over the leaves. You could pick which one you prefer the most and just kind of do a simple solid wash of color over the stencil, and that might save you a little bit of time. But overall, this was a pretty quick process, and I'm going to wipe down the stencil before I remove it. Now I've lined up the second stencil, which is the berry stencil of this background, and I'm first going over the entire area with Concord and Ninth Ballet Slipper ink. And once I get that inked up, I'm going to wipe down my stencil and come in with a mini ink blending brush and add a little bit of watermelon ink to one side of the berry. I'm not going over the entire berry image with this, just to add a little bit of shading. Then I'll wipe down my stencil before I remove it. I've just made a habit of that because I have gotten ink on my hands too many times if I don't wipe down my stencils. And you can see I have this gorgeous background. Now this background is great as it is, but when you go in and you pop up the edges of these leaves, remember they stay attached to the background because they are only cut around the edges and not at the points, then you end up with a lot of dimension. Now, the great thing about this is if you want to add the dimension, you can spend the time to pop up the leaves. If you want to keep it on a flatter side that's a little more mailer friendly, then you can leave it flat and it looks beautiful as it is. Now I'm grabbing the Family Christmas Sentiment stamp set, and I'm going to stamp it on that scrap of white cardstock that I had left over from my postage die cutting. I'm going to mount that in my MISTI stamping tool and ink this up with Concord and Ninth Stardust ink and stamp that onto the cardstock. Now, I love this sentiment set because it has the coordinating dies and they create some really interesting shapes for your sentiment. By the way, I did feel like I needed to double stamp this because my Stardust ink pad needs a little bit of re-inking. In truth, all of my Concord and Ninth ink pads need a little bit of re-inking right now, so they need to go to the ink pad spa, and we'll have to do that soon. But for now, I double stamped that because my ink pad needs a little love. And now I'm taking it over to my Rose Quartz Scout die cutting machine, and I'm going to die cut that out. I am holding this die in place with a little bit of repositionable adhesive so that my die doesn't shift as I run it through my die cut machine. I love this little Scout machine by Spellbinders. It cuts beautifully and it's perfect to keep on my desk for all of these small die cutting jobs. So now that I have that sentiment die cut out, I'm going to take the mini postage die and that sentiment die and die cut it again, this time from watermelon cardstock for the sentiment and from sea glass cardstock for that little mini postage. And I'm going to use these additional dies to add a little more color to my card front and a few extra layers. So I die cut the sentiment die again from Rainforest cardstock, and now I am going to use some liquid glue to mount my stamped sentiment onto that Rainforest layer, and I have slightly offset it. Then I'm going to add some more liquid glue on that stack and add my watermelon layer, and again offset that just slightly so that I have a few of those colors from the background repeated in my sentiment. Now I have my mini postage poinsettia stenciled image and that plain postage die cut from the sea glass cardstock. I'm layering those up together slightly offset to create an additional layer for that mini postage. And then I'm using some 1mm thick foam adhesive from Scrapbook.com. This is kind of a low profile foam adhesive, perfect for when you want just a little extra dimension, but you don't want to go over the top. I know it's very unusual for me not to want to go over the top, but today was that day. So once I mounted the sentiment to the postage with that 1mm adhesive, I went to the standard 2mm high adhesive, and I'm adding that onto the back of this entire grouping. Now, before I add this onto my card front, I grabbed some DMC Diamant gold thread and I'm just wrapping it around my fingers a few times. I'm going to lay that on the background and I squirt a little bit of liquid glue onto the string before I added my sentiment grouping over the top of it using that foam adhesive. And between the liquid glue and the foam adhesive on the back of this sentiment and postage grouping, that will help kind of keep everything in place. Now I wanted to adhere my background with some foam adhesive, but the edges are really narrow. So these Scrapbook.com thin foam adhesive strips are perfect because they're cut to about an 1/8 inch wide, but they give you that dimension. So I'm able to run these along the edges of this die cut background and not have that foam adhesive show through those popped up holly leaves that are all over the back. Once I have my foam adhesive in place all over that background, I can go ahead and remove the backers and place this onto an A2 card base made from some Concord and Ninth sea glass cardstock. And I'm going to add just a little bit more sparkle to this card with a few sparkling clear sequins. So I'm using some liquid glue and an embellishment tool to place those onto the card front. This just brings a little bit more sparkle to the card and kind of catches the eye. And I love to add just tiny bits of sparkle like this. I think they really create a fun card. So there you have it, a beautiful card, perfect for the holidays. It's easy to mass produce and it features a wonderful free gift with purchase from Scrapbook.com. If you want all the details on that, be sure to check the YouTube description below. I will have links over to Scrapbook.com where you can find this. And I will also have a link over to my blog at sprinkledwithglitter.com. Over there, you'll find more still shots, more information, and a complete list of supplies. As always, I want to say thank you so much for stopping by and hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed this project and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications here so you don't miss any of the card making and paper crafting video tutorials I share. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the very end. You know, if you've made it this far, you are one of my favorites. If you want to subscribe to my channel, go ahead and click the button on the left side of the screen. And here's a couple more video tutorials I thought you might enjoy.